The gunshot that rang out through Silver Peak, Colorado, that October morning in 1878 wasn't what made Beatrice Douglas drop her basket of washing. But the massive mountain man who came barreling around the corner immediately afterward, blood streaming from a gash on his temple, certainly did. He didn't stop to apologize or even acknowledge her as he disappeared into the narrow alley between the general store and the boarding house where she worked. Beatrice stood frozen for a moment, her heart hammering, before she hurried to gather her scattered linens from the dusty street. She had only been in Silver Peak for 3 months, having come west from Pennsylvania after her parents died of influenza, and she was still getting used to the rough and tumble nature of frontier life. The boarding house owner, Mrs. Caldwell, had been kind enough to give her a job and a room, though the work was endless and the pay meager. As Beatrice bent to retrieve a pillowcase that had blown against the hitching post, she heard shouting from the direction the mountain man had come. 3 rough-looking men on horseback thundered past, their faces twisted with anger. She pressed herself against the storefront, clutching her basket, and waited until the dust settled before hurrying back inside. Mrs. Caldwell was standing at the window, her plump face creased with worry. "Did you see that commotion?" "I saw a man running," Beatrice admitted, setting her basket down. "He looked hurt." "That would be Nathan Walker," Mrs. Caldwell said with a sigh. "Lives up in the mountains, comes down maybe once a month for supplies, keeps to himself mostly. I wonder what trouble he has gotten himself into now." Beatrice wanted to ask more questions, but Mrs. Caldwell was already bustling toward the kitchen, muttering about having to get lunch ready for the boarders. Beatrice carried the washing upstairs to begin the tedious task of ironing, but she found her thoughts drifting to the man she had glimpsed. He had been enormous, easily over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad they had seemed to block out the sun. His hair had been long and dark, tied back with a strip of leather, and despite the blood and the obvious danger he was fleeing, there had been something compelling about him. She shook her head at her own foolishness. The last thing she needed was to develop romantic notions about a stranger, especially one who seemed to attract trouble. Her goal was to save enough money to eventually open a small shop of her own, perhaps a bakery or a dressmaking business. Romance was a luxury she could not afford. 3 days passed without incident. Beatrice fell into her usual routine of cooking, cleaning, and tending to the needs of the dozen or so men who rented rooms at the boarding house. Most of them were miners or ranch hands, decent enough fellows who kept their language relatively clean in her presence and always thanked her for their meals. She had learned to navigate the attention some of them paid her, deflecting compliments with polite smiles and keeping a professional distance. It was on the 4th day, a bright Tuesday afternoon, that Beatrice heard the pitiful mewing coming from above. She had been hanging laundry in the small yard behind the boarding house when the sound caught her attention. Looking up, she spotted a tiny orange kitten perched precariously on the edge of the roof, crying desperately. "Oh no," Beatrice breathed, setting down her basket. "How did you get up there?" The kitten continued to wail, taking a tentative step forward before seeming to lose its nerve and pressing itself flat against the shingles. Beatrice's heart clenched. She had always loved animals, and the thought of the poor creature being stranded up there was unbearable. She hurried inside to find Mrs. Caldwell. "There is a kitten stuck on the roof. Do you have a ladder?" Mrs. Caldwell looked up from the bread dough she was kneading. "A kitten? Where did it come from?" "I don't know, but it's terrified. Do we have a ladder tall enough to reach?" The older woman wiped her hands on her apron. "We've got one in the shed, but it's not really tall enough for the roof. You would be better off asking one of the men when they get back from work." But that wouldn't be for hours, and the kitten sounded so distressed. Beatrice bit her lip, looking back toward the yard. "I'll try the ladder. Maybe I can reach." "Be careful," Mrs. Caldwell warned. "I don't need you breaking your neck over a stray cat." Beatrice retrieved the ladder from the shed, struggling with its weight as she dragged it to the side of the building. She positioned it as best she could and began to climb, her skirts hampering her movement. When she reached the top rung, she realized Mrs. Caldwell had been right. The roof was still several feet above her, and even stretching as far as she dared, the kitten remained just out of reach. "Come here, sweet thing," she coaxed, extending her hand. "Please come down." The kitten mewed pitifully but didn't move. Beatrice tried to hoist herself higher, gripping the edge of the roof, but her boots slipped on the ladder rung and she had to quickly grab hold to keep from falling. Her heart pounded as she pressed herself against the ladder, suddenly very aware of how dangerous this was. "Need some help." The deep voice startled her so badly she nearly lost her grip again. Looking down, she saw the mountain man standing at the base of the ladder, one hand resting on the frame to steady it. Up close, he was even more imposing than she had remembered. His shoulders were packed with thick muscle, his chest broad beneath a worn leather vest. His dark hair hung past his shoulders, and his face was all hard angles and dark stubble. The gash on his temple had healed to an angry red line. Beatrice found herself at a loss for words. "There's a kitten." Nathan Walker's expression, which had been stern and somewhat wary, softened slightly as he looked past her to the roof. "I see that. You planning on joining it up there?" "I was trying to reach it, but the ladder isn't tall enough." He studied the situation for a moment, then nodded. "Come on down, I'll get it." Beatrice carefully descended, very conscious of his presence below her. When her feet touched the ground, she stepped back to give him room. She had to tilt her head back to look at his face. He had to be at least 6'3", maybe more, and built like he had spent his life doing hard physical labor. There was a raw masculinity about him that made her feel oddly flustered. Nathan didn't bother with the ladder. Instead, he gripped the edge of the roof and pulled himself up with a display of pure strength that left Beatrice staring. He moved with surprising grace for such a large man, hauling himself onto the roof and moving toward the kitten with careful, measured steps. "Easy there, little one," she heard him say, his voice gentling. "I've got you." From her position on the ground, Beatrice could only catch glimpses of what was happening. She heard Nathan's low, soothing murmur as he approached the kitten. Then she heard a tiny meow, followed by what sounded like a chuckle. A moment later, Nathan reappeared at the edge of the roof, the orange kitten cradled carefully in one enormous hand. He lowered himself down with the same easy strength, landing lightly on his feet. The kitten was tucked against his chest, looking impossibly small against his bulk. It was purring now, its tiny paws kneading against his vest. Beatrice's breath caught. The contrast between this massive, rough-looking man and the gentle way he held the tiny creature did something strange to her heart. His large, calloused hand was curved protectively around the kitten's body, his thumb stroking its head with surprising tenderness. There was nothing put on or forced about it. He genuinely cared about the small animal's well-being. "Here you go," Nathan said, starting to hand the kitten to her. But as Beatrice reached out, the kitten made a small sound of protest and clung to Nathan's vest with its tiny claws. He tried to gently detach it, but the kitten was having none of it, mewing pitifully and pressing itself against his chest. "Well," Nathan said, a hint of amusement in his deep voice, "seems like it's made a choice." Beatrice couldn't help but smile. "It likes you. Appears so." He continued to pet the kitten absently, and Beatrice watched his expression soften even further. His face, which she had initially thought was harsh and forbidding, was actually quite handsome when he wasn't scowling. His eyes were a striking gray-green, like the mountains after a storm. "Thank you," Beatrice said. "I was worried I wouldn't be able to get it down before dark." Nathan nodded, still focused on the kitten. "It's young. Probably got separated from its mother. You planning on keeping it?" "I hadn't thought that far ahead," Beatrice admitted. "I just heard it crying and knew I had to help." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Beatrice felt color rising to her cheeks. She was suddenly aware of how disheveled she must appear, her dark blonde hair coming loose from its pins, her dress dusty from the ladder. "That's kind of you," Nathan said. There was something in his tone that suggested kindness was not something he encountered often. Mrs. Caldwell chose that moment to bustle into the yard. "Oh good, you got it down." She stopped short when she saw Nathan, her eyes widening. "Mr. Walker." "I didn't realize you were in town." "Just passing through," Nathan replied. He carefully detached the kitten from his vest and held it out to Beatrice again. This time she took it, cradling the warm, purring bundle against her chest. Their fingers brushed in the transfer, and Beatrice felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. "Will you stay for supper?" Mrs. Caldwell asked. "It's the least we can offer after your help." Nathan hesitated, and Beatrice found herself hoping he would say yes. She wanted to know more about this man who could be so gentle with a tiny kitten, but he shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, but I need to get my supplies and head back up the mountain before dark." Disappointment flashed through Beatrice, sharper than it had any right to be. "Of course." "Well, thank you again." He tipped his head in a small nod, his eyes lingering on her face for just a moment longer than necessary. Then he turned and walked away, his long strides carrying him quickly out of the yard. "Well," Mrs. Caldwell said, watching him go, "that was unexpected." Nathan Walker doesn't usually involve himself in town matters. Beatrice stroked the kitten, feeling its tiny heartbeat against her palm. "He seemed nice." "Nice?" Mrs. Caldwell looked at her with raised eyebrows. "I suppose he can be, though most folks find him intimidating." "He came to Silver Peak about 5 years ago, bought some land up in the high country, keeps to himself mostly. There are rumors, of course." "What kind of rumors?" Beatrice asked, unable to help her curiosity. "Oh, the usual frontier gossip. Some say he's running from something back east. Others say he's hiding from the law. A few claim he's got a fortune in gold hidden in his cabin." Mrs. Caldwell shrugged. "I don't put much stock in any of it. He's always been civil the few times he's come around, and he pays his bills. That's more than can be said for some." Beatrice nodded, but her mind was already drifting. She kept seeing the way Nathan had looked at the kitten, the gentleness in his rough hands. There had been no pretense there, no attempt to impress her. He had simply cared about a helpless creature in need. Something about that had touched her deeply. The kitten mewed, bringing her back to the present. "I suppose I should find it some milk," she said. "You're keeping it then?" Mrs. Caldwell asked. Beatrice looked down at the tiny orange face and felt her heart melt. "I think I have to. I can't just turn it out after everything." Mrs. Caldwell smiled. "Well, it might help keep the mice down. Come on, let's get it fed." That evening, as Beatrice served dinner to the boarders, she found her thoughts returning again and again to Nathan Walker. She had been so caught up in simply surviving these past months, working herself to exhaustion each day and falling into bed too tired to think. But now, something had shifted. She couldn't stop thinking about the mountain man who had rescued a kitten with such unexpected tenderness. "Miss Douglas, you all right?" Beatrice blinked, realizing she had been standing at the table with a bowl of potatoes held motionless in her hands. One of the boarders, a young miner named Tom, was looking at her with concern. "Yes, sorry, just wool gathering." She quickly served the potatoes and moved on, but she could feel heat in her cheeks. Later, after the dishes were done and the kitchen cleaned, Beatrice carried the kitten up to her small room under the eaves. She had fashioned a bed for it out of an old crate lined with soft rags, and the kitten seemed content, its belly full of milk. As she got ready for bed, she found herself moving to the window and looking out at the dark silhouette of the mountains against the star-filled sky. Nathan Walker was up there somewhere, in a cabin she couldn't even imagine. What was his life like? Did he have anyone? Or was he truly as alone as Mrs. Caldwell suggested? And why did the thought of his solitude make her chest ache with something she couldn't quite name? Beatrice pulled herself away from the window with an effort. She was being foolish. Nathan Walker had simply done a kind deed. There was no reason to read anything more into it. But as she lay in bed listening to the kitten's soft breathing, she couldn't quite convince her heart of that. The next few weeks passed in their usual rhythm. Beatrice worked hard, saved what little money she could, and cared for the kitten, who she had named Rusty for his orange coat. He was a source of constant joy, greeting her each morning with enthusiastic purrs and providing entertainment in the evenings. Mrs. Caldwell had been right about his usefulness too. Already, the mouse population in the boarding house had decreased noticeably. Beatrice thought about Nathan more than she should have. She found herself watching for him when she went into town for errands, though she never saw him. She asked casual questions about him, learning that he came down from the mountains roughly once a month for supplies, and that he was generally regarded with a mixture of respect and wariness. He had intervened in a few disputes over the years, and his sheer size and presence were usually enough to end any trouble without violence. It was nearly 3 weeks after the kitten incident when Beatrice saw him again. She had gone to the general store to pick up thread and fabric for mending, and as she stepped out onto the boardwalk, she spotted him across the street loading supplies onto a pack mule. Her heart did an unexpected leap. He looked just as imposing as she remembered, his broad shoulders straining the seams of his shirt as he hefted a heavy sack. His dark hair was tied back again, and even from a distance, she could see the play of muscles in his arms. Before she could second-guess herself, Beatrice crossed the street. "Mr. Walker," he turned, and something flickered in his eyes when he saw her. Recognition, certainly, and perhaps something else. "Miss Douglas," she supplied. "Beatrice Douglas, Miss Douglas." He nodded. "How's the kitten?" "He's wonderful. I named him Rusty. He's already catching mice and making himself quite at home." She smiled. "I never properly thanked you for your help that day." "No thanks necessary. Anyone would have done the same." "I'm not so sure about that," Beatrice said honestly. "But either way, I'm grateful." Nathan seemed uncertain how to respond to that. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with the attention. Up close, Beatrice noticed details she had missed before. There was a scar along his jaw, and his hands were crisscrossed with the marks of hard work. But his eyes were kind, she realized. For all his rough appearance, there was nothing mean or cruel in his gaze. "I should get going," Nathan said after a moment. "Long ride back." "Of course. I didn't mean to keep you." Beatrice stepped back, feeling suddenly foolish for approaching him. But then she found herself saying, "If you're ever in town and need a hot meal, Mrs. Caldwell's boarding house always has room at the table." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. "That's kind of you." "You were kind to help me," Beatrice replied. "And to Rusty." A hint of a smile touched his lips, softening his features. "Rusty's a good name." Then he turned back to his mule, checking the straps on the loaded supplies. Beatrice knew she should walk away, but she found herself lingering. There was something about Nathan Walker that drew her, something beyond his obvious physical strength. It was the gentleness she had glimpsed, the quiet competence, the sense that beneath his rough exterior was a man of depth and character. "Miss Douglas." Nathan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Yes," You should be careful. There's been trouble lately, some rough characters passing through. What kind of trouble? His expression darkened. The kind that doesn't respect decent women. Just be careful. Don't go wandering alone after dark. The protective note in his voice sent a warm shiver through her. I'll be careful. Thank you for the warning. He nodded once more, then swung himself onto his horse with fluid ease. Beatrice watched as he rode out of town, leading the pack mule behind him. Even after he disappeared from view, she stood there, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. Beatrice. Mrs. Caldwell's voice made her jump. The older woman was standing outside the general store, her arms crossed. What are you doing standing in the street like a statue? Nothing, Beatrice said quickly, hurrying over. Just saying hello to Mr. Walker. Mrs. Caldwell's eyes narrowed shrewdly. Is that so? He rescued Rusty, Beatrice said, as if that explained everything. Mrs. Caldwell didn't look convinced. Come on, we have work to do. As they walked back to the boarding house, Mrs. Caldwell said carefully, Nathan Walker is a good man as far as I can tell, but he's not the settling down type, Beatrice. He's made a life for himself up in those mountains, and I don't see him changing that for anyone. I wasn't thinking. Beatrice began, then stopped. Who was she trying to fool? She had been thinking exactly that, or at least wondering. I barely know him. Sometimes that's when it's most dangerous, Mrs. Caldwell said gently. When we don't know someone, we can imagine them to be whatever we want them to be. Reality doesn't always match up. Beatrice knew she was right, but that didn't stop her from thinking about Nathan for the rest of the day. That night, as she lay in bed with Rusty curled up beside her, she thought about his warning. There had been genuine concern in his voice. He cared about her safety, even though they had barely spoken. The trouble Nathan had mentioned revealed itself 2 days later. Beatrice was walking back from the dry goods store when she heard shouting from the saloon. Moments later, a man came staggering out, clearly drunk despite it being barely past noon. His eyes fixed on Beatrice, and something unpleasant twisted his features. Well, hello there, pretty thing, he slurred, moving to block her path. Beatrice's heart began to race. Excuse me, please. What's your hurry? Stay and talk with me. He reached for her arm. Beatrice jerked back, her packages tumbling from her arms. Leave me alone. The man laughed, a ugly sound. Aw, don't be like that. I just want to be friendly. The lady asked you to leave her alone. Beatrice's head whipped around. Nathan was standing at the corner of the building, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. He looked absolutely furious, his eyes cold and hard as stone. He moved between Beatrice and the drunk man with deliberate intent. This ain't your business, the drunk slurred, but he took a step back. I'm making it my business. Nathan's voice was low and dangerous. You're going to walk away right now, and you're not going to bother this woman again. Understand? The drunk seemed to be weighing his options. He was a big man himself, but Nathan towered over him, and there was something in Nathan's stance that promised swift and painful consequences if he pushed this. Fine, the man muttered. Wasn't interested anyway. He stumbled off down the street, casting dark looks over his shoulder. Nathan waited until he was out of sight before turning to Beatrice. Are you all right? Yes, thank you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't. Beatrice realized her hands were shaking. The reality of the situation was sinking in now that the immediate danger had passed. Let's get you back to the boarding house, Nathan said. He bent to collect her scattered packages, his movements careful despite his obvious anger. When he straightened, he gestured toward the street. Come on. They walked in silence for a moment, Nathan keeping himself between Beatrice and any potential threats. Despite her fright, Beatrice found his presence comforting. She felt safe beside him, protected. I thought you had gone back to your cabin, she said finally. I had. Realized I forgot something, so I came back down, He glanced at her. "Lucky timing, I guess." "Very lucky," Beatrice agreed. She meant it. "Thank you, Nathan." It was the first time she had used his given name, and she saw his step falter slightly before he continued walking. "You're welcome." When they reached the boarding house, Mrs. Caldwell took one look at Beatrice's pale face and ushered her inside, demanding to know what had happened. Nathan gave a brief explanation, his jaw tight with suppressed anger. "That man should be run out of town," Mrs. Caldwell declared. "I'll speak to the sheriff." "Good idea," Nathan agreed. He set Beatrice's packages on the table. "I should go." "No," Beatrice said suddenly. Both Nathan and Mrs. Caldwell looked at her in surprise. "That is, you came all the way back down the mountain. You should at least stay for a meal, please." I would feel better knowing you had eaten before making the journey back." It was a flimsy excuse, and they all knew it, but Nathan looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression softened. "All right, if it's no trouble." "No trouble at all," Mrs. Caldwell said briskly. "Beatrice, why don't you show Mr. Walker where he can wash up while I set another place?" Beatrice led Nathan to the washroom, very aware of him following behind her. In the small space, his size seemed even more pronounced. She found herself fumbling with the towel, her fingers clumsy. "Here," Nathan said, taking it from her gently. Their fingers brushed again, and Beatrice felt that same jolt of awareness. "I'm sorry," she said. "I think I'm more shaken than I realized." "That's understandable. He scared you." Nathan's eyes searched her face. "But you're safe now." "Because of you." Beatrice looked up at him, really looked at him. This close, she could see the flecks of green in his gray eyes, the slight lines at their corners that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor would suggest. "You keep rescuing me." "Maybe you keep needing rescuing," Nathan said, but there was no judgment in his tone, only a hint of warmth. "I'm not usually so helpless," Beatrice protested. "Back in Pennsylvania, I never." "This isn't Pennsylvania," Nathan said gently. "The frontier is harder, rougher." "You're doing fine, Beatrice." The way he said her name, in that deep voice of his, made her shiver. She was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, how easily he could reach out and touch her. The air between them felt charged somehow, full of unspoken things. "I should let you wash up," Beatrice said, but she didn't move, neither did Nathan. He was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Beatrice." "Dinner's ready," Mrs. Caldwell's voice called from the kitchen. The spell broke. Nathan stepped back, and Beatrice hurried from the room, her cheeks burning. She went to help Mrs. Caldwell serve, grateful for something to do with her shaking hands. The boarders were already gathering around the long table, and their eyes widened when Nathan emerged from the washroom. Most of them had heard of Nathan Walker, even if they hadn't met him. His reputation preceded him. "This is Nathan Walker," Mrs. Caldwell announced. "He'll be joining us for dinner." The meal was lively, with Nathan fielding questions about mountain life and offering advice on everything from hunting to reading weather signs. Beatrice found herself fascinated by the glimpses into his world. He spoke of solitude with a kind of reverence, of the peace found in nature, of the hard but satisfying work of living off the land. "Don't you get lonely?" one of the boarders asked. Nathan considered the question. "Sometimes, but there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. I've known plenty of people who are lonely in crowds." His eyes flickered to Beatrice as he said it, and she felt seen in a way she hadn't in months. It was true. Since coming to Silver Peak, she had been surrounded by people at the boarding house, but she had felt achingly lonely. Until today. Until Nathan. After dinner, Nathan prepared to leave. It was already late afternoon, and he had a long ride ahead of him. Beatrice walked him out to where his horse and mule were tethered. "Thank you again," she said, "for everything." "You don't have to keep thanking me," Nathan replied. He hesitated, then said, "Would you mind if I checked in next time I'm in town, just to make sure you're all right?" Beatrice's heart soared. "I would like that very much." Nathan nodded, something like relief crossing his face. "Good, that's good." He swung onto his horse, then looked down at her. "Take care of yourself, Beatrice, and Rusty. I will. Be safe on your journey." She watched him ride out of town again, but this time the ache in her chest was different. It wasn't disappointment or mere curiosity. It was something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. She was falling for Nathan Walker, and she knew it was probably foolish, probably hopeless. But her heart didn't seem to care about logic. The next few weeks crawled by. Beatrice threw herself into her work, but she found herself constantly watching for Nathan, hoping each day would be the one when he appeared. Mrs. Caldwell noticed her distraction but said nothing, though her knowing look spoke volumes. When Nathan finally did come to town, nearly a month later, Beatrice was hanging laundry in the yard. She heard his deep voice greeting someone on the street and nearly dropped the sheet she was holding. By the time she had composed herself and hurried around to the front of the boarding house, Nathan was tying his horse to the hitching post. "Nathan." She hadn't meant to sound quite so eager, but she couldn't help herself. He turned, and his face broke into a smile that transformed his rugged features. "Beatrice, it's good to see you, you too. You're here for supplies, and to check on you like I said I would." His eyes roamed her face. "You look well." "I am well. There's been no more trouble." She twisted her hands in her apron. "Would you like to come in? I could make coffee." "I'd like that." They sat in the boarding house kitchen, which was blessedly empty in the mid-morning lull. Beatrice poured coffee and set out some of the cookies she had baked that morning. Nathan took one and bit into it, his eyes widening slightly. "These are delicious." "Thank you. Baking is something I've always enjoyed." Beatrice sat across from him, cradling her own cup. "How have you been? How is life in the mountains?" "Same as always. Cold, quiet, peaceful." He paused. "I thought about you a lot." The admission hung in the air between them. Beatrice felt her pulse quicken. "I thought about you too." Nathan's gray-green eyes locked with hers. "Did you?" "Yes. I wondered what you were doing up there all alone. Whether you were warm enough, whether you had enough to eat." She laughed self-consciously. "I know you're perfectly capable of taking care of yourself, but I still wondered." "I wondered the same about you," Nathan said. "Whether you were safe, whether that man came back and bothered you again." "The sheriff ran him out of town," Beatrice assured him. "There's been no sign of him." "Good." Nathan took another cookie, then said carefully, "Beatrice, I'm not good with words, never have been, but I want you to know that meeting you has been. It's meant something to me." Beatrice's breath caught. "It's meant something to me too." "I can't offer you much," Nathan continued, his voice rough with emotion. "I live alone in the mountains. It's a hard life, but I find myself wanting things I haven't wanted in years." "What things?" Beatrice whispered. "Company. Conversation. Someone to share meals with." He looked directly at her. "Your company specifically." Joy bubbled up in Beatrice's chest. "I would like that too. Very much." Nathan reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. The touch sent electricity racing through her. "Would you let me court you properly? I know I'm not much of a prize. I'm too rough, too solitary, but I promise I would do my best to make you happy." "You're not rough," Beatrice said fiercely. "Well, you are, but in a good way. You're strong and capable and kind. You saved Rusty. You protected me, and when you look at me, I feel—" She struggled to find the words. "I feel like I matter, like I'm not just another burden or another chore." Nathan's hand tightened on hers. "You could never be a burden, you're—" He shook his head. "I don't have the words." "You're special, Beatrice. I knew it the moment I saw you trying to rescue that kitten, willing to risk yourself for something so small and helpless." "Then yes," Beatrice said, her eyes shining. Yes, I would very much like for you to court me." The smile that spread across Nathan's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. He lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture both old-fashioned and incredibly sweet. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. "When will you come back to town?" she asked. "I was planning on a month, but I could come more often. Every 2 weeks, maybe. I would like that." They spent the rest of the morning talking, sharing stories about their lives. Nathan told her about growing up in Missouri, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 20, about the restlessness that had driven him west. Beatrice shared her own story, the grief of losing her parents, the loneliness of being the last of her family, the hope that had brought her to Colorado. "It's strange," Beatrice said. "I came here thinking I wanted to be independent, to build something of my own, and I still want that. But I also want—" She trailed off, unsure how to express it. "Connection," Nathan finished. "You want both. There's nothing wrong with that. You think they can coexist, independence and connection." Nathan considered this. "I think they have to. True connection means two whole people choosing to be together, not one person being absorbed by the other. At least, that's what I believe." Beatrice felt something settle in her chest. "I believe that too." When Nathan finally left to get his supplies, he promised to return in 2 weeks. Beatrice watched him go with a lightness in her heart she hadn't felt in years. Mrs. Caldwell found her standing in the yard, smiling at nothing. "He asked to court you, didn't he?" the older woman said. Beatrice turned to her, her smile widening. "Yes, he did." Mrs. Caldwell studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. I was wrong before. I think you might be exactly what Nathan Walker needs and vice versa." "Do you really think so?" "I do. Just don't rush things, dear. Take your time, get to know each other. The mountains aren't going anywhere, and neither is your heart." It was good advice, and Beatrice tried to follow it. But as the days passed, she found herself counting down to Nathan's return with increasing impatience. She realized, with some amusement, that she was acting like a schoolgirl with her first crush. But it felt wonderful, this giddy anticipation. It made her feel alive in a way she hadn't since before her parents died. Nathan returned exactly when he said he would. This time he brought her a gift, a small wooden carving of a cat that looked remarkably like Rusty. "I made it," he said, looking almost shy as he handed it to her. "I'm not much of an artist, but I thought you might like it." Beatrice held the carving carefully, marveling at the detail. Every whisker, every curve of the tail had been rendered with care. "It's beautiful. You made this. Winter nights are long in the mountains. Gives me time for whittling." He cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk with me, see a bit of the countryside." "I'd love to." They walked along the creek that ran through Silver Peak, the October air crisp and clear. Nathan pointed out animal tracks, identified bird calls, showed her which plants were edible and which were poisonous. Beatrice found herself fascinated by his knowledge, by the way he moved through nature as if he were a part of it. "You really love it up there, don't you?" she asked. "I do," Nathan admitted. "But I've been thinking lately that maybe it could be even better with the right person to share it." Beatrice felt warmth spread through her chest. "Tell me about your cabin. What's it like?" Nathan's eyes lit up as he described his home. It was simple but sturdy, he said, built with logs he had cut and shaped himself. There was a large stone fireplace, a good well nearby, and a view that stretched for miles. He had a small barn for his animals, a garden plot for vegetables, and enough land to ensure his privacy. "It sounds wonderful," Beatrice said honestly. She tried to imagine herself there, waking to mountain views, spending evenings by the fireplace with Nathan. The image came surprisingly easily. They walked for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Nathan was surprisingly easy to talk to once he opened up. He had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He also listened intently when she spoke, as if everything she said was important. When they returned to the boarding house, Nathan asked, "May I call on you again in 2 weeks?" "Yes, please." He smiled and touched her cheek gently with one calloused finger. "I'll count the days." So began their courtship. Every 2 weeks, Nathan made the long journey down from the mountains to see Beatrice. Sometimes they walked. Sometimes they sat in the boarding house parlor and talked. Sometimes they attended town gatherings. Slowly, Beatrice got to know the man beneath the intimidating exterior. She learned that Nathan had a weakness for berry pie and would eat an entire one if given the chance. That he had taught himself to read at age 15 and had a collection of books in his cabin that he treasured. That he had once nursed an injured wolf back to health and released it, only to have it return periodically to his cabin as if checking on him. Nathan learned that Beatrice sang when she worked, usually hymns her mother had taught her. That she had wanted to be a teacher before circumstances forced her west. That she was terrified of thunderstorms but hid it well. That her greatest dream was to have a family of her own, a place where she belonged. As November arrived and the weather turned colder, their relationship deepened. Nathan began staying overnight at the boarding house during his visits, sleeping in one of the guest rooms. Beatrice cherished the mornings when they could share breakfast together, the way his eyes sought hers across the table, the small smiles they exchanged. One evening, as they sat by the fire in the parlor, Nathan said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" Beatrice was knitting a scarf and she looked up from her work. "About the future, about us." He shifted in his chair. "I know we haven't been courting long, but I'm not getting any younger and I know what I want." Beatrice's heart began to pound. "What do you want, you?" "I want you in my life, Beatrice. Not just for visits every 2 weeks, but always. I want to wake up next to you, share my meals with you, build a life with you." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I know the mountains are harsh and the life is hard. I know I'm asking you to give up the security you have here, but I swear I would do everything in my power to make you happy, to give you a good life." Tears pricked Beatrice's eyes. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes." Nathan slid from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. "Beatrice Douglas, will you marry me?" "Yes," Beatrice whispered, then louder, "Yes, Nathan. Yes, I'll marry you." Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Beatrice felt his heart hammering beneath her cheek, felt his breath in her hair. When he pulled back to look at her face, she saw that his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I'll make you happy," he promised. "I swear it." "You already do," Beatrice told him. She reached up to touch his face, feeling the roughness of his stubble against her palm. "You make me happier than I've ever been." Nathan lowered his head and kissed her, gentle and sweet. It was Beatrice's first real kiss, and it made her head spin. His lips were surprisingly soft, and he cradled her face as if she were something precious and fragile. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "When?" Beatrice asked. "When what?" "When should we get married?" Nathan considered this. "Before winter sets in properly. Say 3 weeks. That will give you time to prepare, and we can get settled in the cabin before the heavy snows come." 3 weeks. It seemed impossibly soon and yet not soon enough. Beatrice nodded. 3 weeks. The next morning, Mrs. Caldwell hugged Beatrice tight when she heard the news. "I'm so happy for you, dear. Nathan is a good man. He'll take care of you." "I know he will." Beatrice smiled through happy tears. "I still can hardly believe it. A few months ago I was so lonely, so lost. And now—" "Now you're found," Mrs. Caldwell finished. "That's how love works sometimes. It finds us when we least expect it." The 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Beatrice sewed a new dress for the ceremony, a simple but pretty creation in deep blue wool. She packed her belongings, which didn't amount to much. Mrs. Caldwell insisted on giving her some household items to start her new home, and the other boarders contributed what they could. Nathan came down from the mountains 5 days before the wedding. He had business to attend to in town, he said, and Beatrice suspected he simply couldn't wait any longer to see her. They spent as much time together as propriety allowed, taking walks and making plans for their future. "I've been working on the cabin," Nathan told her, "making it more comfortable. I added shelves for your things and made a proper cabinet for the kitchen. I want you to feel at home there." "I will," Beatrice assured him. "As long as you're there, it will be home." The wedding took place on a cold but clear December morning at the small church in Silver Peak. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, with Mrs. Caldwell and several of the boarders in attendance. The minister, an elderly man who had seen countless frontier weddings, smiled as Nathan and Beatrice exchanged their vows. When Nathan said, "I do," his voice was strong and sure. When Beatrice said the same, her voice trembled with emotion. Nathan slipped a simple gold band on her finger, and the minister pronounced them husband and wife. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said with a smile. Nathan pulled Beatrice into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, seemingly forgetting they had an audience. When they finally broke apart, Beatrice was blushing and breathless, and the small gathering was applauding. Mrs. Caldwell hosted a wedding breakfast at the boarding house, and it was a joyful affair. Beatrice felt surrounded by warmth and good wishes, but as much as she appreciated everyone's kindness, she was eager to begin her new life with Nathan. They left Silver Peak that afternoon, Nathan on his horse and Beatrice on a gentle mare he had purchased for her. A pack mule carried Beatrice's belongings and their supplies. Rusty traveled in a wicker basket tied securely to Beatrice's saddle, meowing his displeasure at the arrangement. "Don't worry," Beatrice soothed him. "You'll love the mountains." The journey took several hours, climbing steadily into the high country. The air grew thinner and colder, and Beatrice was grateful for the warm coat Nathan had insisted she buy. As they rode, Nathan pointed out landmarks and told her stories about the area. His knowledge of the land was impressive, born of 5 years of living in harmony with it. Finally, as the sun was beginning to set, they rounded a bend and Nathan said, "There." Beatrice looked and caught her breath. The cabin was nestled in a small valley, protected on 3 sides by towering pines. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks already white with snow. Smoke curled from the chimney, and there was a warmth about the place that immediately appealed to her. "You started a fire before you left?" she asked. "Had a neighbor check on it for me," Nathan said. "Jake Winters lives about 3 miles that way. Good man. You'll like him and his wife, Sarah." As they approached the cabin, Beatrice took in more details. It was larger than she had expected, with a covered porch and real glass windows. The logs were chinked tight against the weather, and the door was solid and well hung. Nathan had obviously taken great care in building his home. He helped her dismount and then stood there for a moment, looking uncertain. "Well, here we are." Beatrice smiled at his nervousness. This strong, capable man was worried about what she thought of his home. She touched his arm. "It's wonderful, Nathan. Show me inside." His expression relaxed. "Of course." He opened the door and then, to Beatrice's surprise, swept her up into his arms. She gasped and clutched at his shoulders. "What are you doing, carrying my bride over the threshold?" Nathan said with a grin. "Isn't that what you're supposed to do?" Beatrice laughed as he carried her inside. The interior of the cabin was warm and inviting. There was indeed a large stone fireplace with a cheerful fire burning. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a sturdy table and chairs, a comfortable-looking armchair near the fire, and the shelves Nathan had mentioned lining one wall. A doorway led to what she assumed was the bedroom. Nathan set her down gently. "What do you think?" Beatrice turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. It was simple but well made, everything neat and in its place. She could see evidence of Nathan's preparations in the new curtains on the windows, the extra blankets folded on the chair, the fresh herbs hanging near the stove. "I think it's perfect," she said honestly. "I think we're going to be very happy here." The relief on Nathan's face was palpable. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead. "I hope so. I want to give you everything, Beatrice. You already have. You've given me love, a home, a future. What more could I want?" They spent the evening settling in. Nathan brought in Beatrice's things and helped her unpack. He showed her where everything was, how to work the stove, where he kept supplies. Rusty, released from his basket, explored with feline curiosity, sniffing every corner before finally settling near the fire with a contented purr. That night, they lay together in Nathan's bed, now their bed, wrapped in each other's arms. The wind howled outside, but inside they were warm and safe. Beatrice listened to Nathan's steady heartbeat beneath her ear and felt a peace she had never known. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked softly. "So happy," Beatrice whispered. "Are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He tightened his arms around her. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for rescuing my kitten," Beatrice said with a smile. "If you hadn't, we might never have met." Nathan chuckled. "Best rescue I ever made." They made love that night, tender and slow, learning each other's bodies, discovering new depths of intimacy. Afterward, Beatrice lay in Nathan's arms and thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, she had been alone and grieving, barely able to imagine a future. Now she was married to a wonderful man, starting a new life in the mountains. It seemed impossible, like something from a fairy tale. But it was real. Nathan's solid warmth beside her, his gentle breathing, the calloused hand resting on her hip, all of it was gloriously, wonderfully real. The first weeks of marriage were an adjustment. Beatrice had to learn the rhythms of mountain life, the daily tasks that kept them fed and warm. Nathan was patient, teaching her how to tend the animals, how to read the weather, how to conserve resources through the long winter. Beatrice, in turn, brought her own skills to their household. She was an excellent cook, and Nathan marveled at the meals she produced from their simple pantry. She sewed and mended their clothes, kept the cabin spotlessly clean, and created small touches of beauty wherever she could. She arranged wildflowers in jars, hung curtains she embroidered herself, made cushions for the chairs. But more than the practical contributions, they brought each other companionship. They talked for hours by the fire, sharing thoughts and dreams and memories. They laughed together, worked together, explored the mountains together. Nathan taught Beatrice to snowshoe when the deep snows came, and she delighted in the winter wonderland around them. They visited Jake and Sarah Winters several times, and Beatrice was grateful to have a friend in Sarah. The two women bonded quickly, and Sarah was full of advice about mountain living. Jake and Nathan had an easy camaraderie, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. Christmas came, and Beatrice decorated the cabin with pine boughs and berries. She baked special treats and made Nathan a warm scarf and gloves. Nathan gave her a beautiful necklace he had carved from wood and polished until it gleamed. It was in the shape of a heart, simple but perfect. "I love it," Beatrice said, tears in her eyes as Nathan fastened it around her neck. "I'll treasure it always." "Not as much as I treasure you," Nathan replied, pulling her close. Winter deepened, and they were snowed in for weeks at a time. But Beatrice found she didn't mind. Their world narrowed to the cabin and each other, and she was content. They read together in the evenings, Nathan's deep voice bringing books to life. They played cards and told stories. They made love often, passionate and tender by turns. In late January, Beatrice began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited another few weeks to be sure before telling Nathan. When she finally did, one evening after dinner, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby," he breathed, his eyes wide. "We're going to have a baby." "Yes," Beatrice said, smiling through happy tears. "In late summer, I think." Nathan whooped with joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around before carefully setting her down. "Are you all right? Should you be sitting down? What do you need?" Beatrice laughed at his sudden concern. "I'm fine, Nathan. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I'm not fragile." But Nathan couldn't seem to help himself. From that day forward, he was even more protective and attentive. He wouldn't let Beatrice lift anything heavy, insisted she rest often, and generally hovered like a nervous mother hen. It was sweet, even when it was a bit much. As winter gave way to spring, Beatrice's belly began to swell with their growing child. Nathan would place his large hand on her stomach and marvel at the life they had created together. He talked to the baby, telling it about the mountains it would grow up in, the adventures they would have. "Boy or girl, it doesn't matter," he said one evening, "as long as you and the baby are healthy." "I think a boy," Beatrice said. "He's very active, just like his father, a son." Nathan's eyes grew distant. "I never let myself imagine having a family. It seemed like something for other people, not for someone like me." "Why not for you?" Beatrice asked gently. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I always thought I was too rough, too isolated, that I didn't have anything to offer a family, but you saw something in me, Beatrice. You saw past the rough exterior to whatever was underneath." "I saw your heart," Beatrice said simply. "The day you rescued Rusty, you were so gentle with him, so careful. I knew then that you were a good man." "That's when you fell in love with me?" Nathan asked with a smile. "Over a kitten?" "That's when I started falling," Beatrice corrected. "I think I'm still falling more every day." Nathan kissed her softly. "Good, because I'm falling too." As summer approached, Nathan began making preparations for the baby's arrival. He built a beautiful cradle from pine, sanding it until it was smooth as glass and carving small animals along the edges. He rode down to Silver Peak to stock up on supplies, and he arranged for Sarah Winters to come stay with them when Beatrice's time came. "I'm nervous," Nathan admitted one night. "What if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong," Beatrice assured him, though she had her own fears. Childbirth was dangerous, especially in the mountains far from a doctor, but she tried to stay positive for Nathan's sake and her own. "Women have been doing this forever. Sarah will be here to help, and you'll be here. Everything will be fine." Nathan pulled her close. "I can't lose you, Beatrice. You're everything to me." "You won't lose me," Beatrice promised. "I'm not going anywhere. We're going to raise this baby together and maybe more babies after that. We're going to grow old together in this cabin, surrounded by our family." "That sounds perfect," Nathan whispered. Beatrice's labor began on a warm August evening. The pain started gradually, giving Nathan time to ride to fetch Sarah while Beatrice paced the cabin, breathing through the contractions. By the time Nathan returned with Sarah and Jake, the labor was progressing rapidly. "You're doing great," Sarah encouraged as she helped Beatrice to the bedroom. "Just keep breathing." Nathan was beside himself with worry, pacing the main room while Jake tried to distract him. But when Beatrice cried out, Nathan pushed past Jake and went to her side. "I'm here," he said, taking her hand. "I'm right here, Beatrice. Don't leave," Beatrice gasped. "Please don't leave me." "Never." Nathan stayed with her through the long night, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring words of love and encouragement. He was pale and clearly terrified, but he didn't leave her side. Finally, as dawn was breaking, their son entered the world with a lusty cry. Sarah cleaned him quickly and placed him in Beatrice's arms. Nathan stared at the tiny, red-faced bundle, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's a boy," Beatrice said, smiling through tears of exhaustion and joy. "We have a son, Nathan." "A son," Nathan repeated. He reached out with one large finger to touch the baby's tiny hand, and their son immediately grasped it. Nathan's face crumpled and tears streamed down his cheeks. "He's perfect. You're both perfect." They named him Noah Walker, and he became the center of their world. Nathan was a devoted father, doting on his son with a tenderness that made Beatrice's heart overflow with love. He would hold Noah for hours, rocking him and singing old songs in his deep voice. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with the baby when he was fussy, and looked at his son with such pure love that it took Beatrice's breath away. As Noah grew, he became a happy, healthy child. He had Nathan's gray-green eyes and Beatrice's blonde hair, and he was clearly going to be tall and strong like his father. He took his first steps in the cabin. His first words were "Mama" and "Papa," and his first adventure was a snowshoe trek with Nathan when he was barely 2. Life in the mountains was hard but good. There were challenges, harsh winters, illness, isolation, but Nathan and Beatrice faced them together. Their love deepened with each passing year, growing from the initial spark of attraction into something solid and enduring. When Noah was 3, Beatrice became pregnant again. This time, it was a girl whom they named Nina. She was tiny and fierce from the start, with dark hair like Nathan's and a determined personality that made them all laugh. Noah adored his baby sister, following her around and trying to help care for her in his own clumsy way. Nathan built an addition onto the cabin, creating more space for their growing family. He taught Noah to ride, to track animals, to read the signs of nature. Beatrice taught both children their letters and numbers, determined that they would have an education even in the mountains. She baked and sewed and gardened, creating a warm, loving home. They made trips to Silver Peak several times a year, and Beatrice would visit Mrs. Caldwell. The older woman was delighted to see how happy Beatrice was, how her family had grown. "You made the right choice," Mrs. Caldwell would say. "Nathan Walker was the right man for you." "He was," Beatrice would agree. "He is." When Noah was 10 and Nina was 7, Beatrice gave birth to twins, 2 boys they named Nicholas and Nalan. Nathan was overwhelmed with pride, 4 children to carry on the Walker name. The cabin was noisy and chaotic now, full of life and laughter. "This is what I always dreamed of," Beatrice told Nathan one evening. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard. "A family, a home, people to love." "Me too," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Though I didn't know it until I met you." "You gave me all of this, Beatrice. You gave me everything." "We gave it to each other," Beatrice corrected. She looked at her husband, seeing the silver threading through his dark hair now, the lines at the corners of his eyes. He was still as strong as ever, still protective and loving. "I'm so grateful for that day you rescued Rusty. If you hadn't, I would have found another excuse to talk to you," Nathan said with a grin. "I was already gone on you, Beatrice. That kitten just gave me an opening." Beatrice laughed. "Really? Really? I saw you in town and thought you were the prettiest thing I'd ever seen. And then when you were trying so hard to reach that kitten, risking yourself to save it, I knew you were special. I knew I wanted to know you better. And now you're stuck with me," Beatrice teased. "Best thing that ever happened to me," Nathan said seriously. He cupped her face in his hands, those big, gentle hands that had held so many things precious to her over the years. "I love you, Beatrice, more now than ever. I love you too. Beatrice kissed him softly. Forever. As the years passed, their children grew. Noah inherited his father's size and strength, becoming a skilled hunter and tracker. Nina was fierce and independent, determined to do everything her brothers did. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief together. Nathan taught his children everything he knew about living in the mountains, about respect for nature, about hard work and integrity. Beatrice taught them kindness, compassion, and the importance of family. Together, they raised 4 good, strong, loving children. When Noah turned 18, he announced his intention to stake his own claim deeper in the mountains. Nathan helped him build a cabin, passing on the knowledge he had gained over the years. Nina, at 15, declared she wanted to be a teacher and began studying furiously, determined to bring education to the scattered mountain communities. The twins, now 8, were still young enough to be at home, though they too were already showing signs of independence and capability. They helped with chores without complaint and spent their free time exploring the forests and learning from their father. One evening, as Beatrice and Nathan sat by the fire, their hands intertwined, Nathan said, "We did good, didn't we?" "We did very good," Beatrice agreed. She looked around the cabin, seeing the evidence of their life together in every corner. The cradle Nathan had made was now used for firewood storage, but she still remembered rocking each of their babies in it. The shelves were full of books and treasures collected over the years. The walls held drawings the children had made, preserved and framed. "You ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Giving up town life for this?" Beatrice turned to look at him. "Never, not once. This has been the best life I could have imagined." "Even in the beginning when it was hard and you were learning, even then, because I was with you." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "You were worth every challenge, every hardship. You still are." Nathan pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the crackle of the fire and the soft breathing of the twins in their bed. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere an owl hooted. "Tell me again," Nathan said softly, "about the day we met." It was a story they had told many times to each other and to their children, but Beatrice never tired of it. "I was trying to rescue a kitten from the roof," she began, "and this big, scary mountain man appeared and saved us both." "I wasn't scary," Nathan protested, as he always did. "You were terrifying," Beatrice countered. "All tall and muscular and intimidating. But then you held that tiny kitten so carefully, with such gentleness, and I saw your heart. I saw the real you beneath the rough exterior. And you fell in love with me right then." "Right then," Beatrice confirmed. "How could I not? You showed me that strength and gentleness could coexist, that a big, powerful man could have the tenderest heart. You showed me what real love looks like." Nathan kissed the top of her head. "You showed me the same thing. You took a chance on a lonely mountain man. You saw something worth loving when I couldn't see it myself." They sat in comfortable silence, years of love and understanding flowing between them without need for words. This was what they had built together. Not just a cabin or a family, but a life full of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. As Beatrice drifted off to sleep that night, safe in Nathan's arms, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, the grief that had driven her west, the loneliness that had nearly consumed her, and then the unexpected gift of a man who could be both fierce and tender, strong and gentle, all because of a kitten stuck on a roof. Life had a funny way of working out, Beatrice thought. You could plan and prepare all you wanted, but sometimes the best things came when you least expected them. Sometimes love found you in the most unlikely circumstances, in the form of a mountain man rescuing a kitten, showing you his tender side and stealing your heart forever. Years continued to pass in the mountains. The twins grew into strong young men as capable as their older brother. Nina achieved her dream and opened a small school in Silver Peak, teaching children from the surrounding areas. Noah married a lovely young woman named Emma and gave Nathan and Beatrice their first grandchildren. Through it all, Nathan and Beatrice remained at the center, the foundation upon which their family was built. They grew older together, their hair turning silver, their faces lined with the evidence of years lived fully. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deeper, more essential with each passing year. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the mountain cabin for a celebration. The cabin was packed, noise and laughter filling every corner. Nathan stood on the porch with Beatrice, watching their family through the window. "Can you believe all this came from one scared kitten?" Nathan said with a smile. "I can believe it," Beatrice replied. "That kitten brought you into my life. Everything good that's happened since traces back to that moment." "I'm glad I was there that day," Nathan said. "I'm glad I got to rescue your kitten, meet you, fall in love with you. I'm glad for all of it." "Me too." Beatrice turned in his arms to face him. Even after 30 years, her heart still fluttered when he looked at her with those gray-green eyes. "I love you, Nathan Walker, today and always." "I love you too, Beatrice Walker, forever and beyond." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Inside, their family laughed and celebrated, but for a moment, it was just the two of them. The mountain man and the woman who had seen his tender heart. The couple who had built a life on love, trust, and the willingness to take a chance on each other. It was, Beatrice thought, the perfect ending to their story. Except it wasn't an ending at all. It was just another beautiful moment in a life full of them, with many more still to come. As they rejoined their family, Nathan's hand secure in hers, Beatrice smiled. She had come to Colorado looking for a new start, a way to survive after losing everything. Instead, she had found love, family, purpose, and joy beyond measure. She had found home in the arms of a gentle giant who had shown her that the most surprising packages often held the greatest treasures. And it all started with a kitten on a roof and a mountain man brave enough to rescue it, tender enough to care, and loving enough to give his whole heart to the woman who saw who he really was. The celebration continued late into the night. Stories were told and retold, laughter echoed off the mountains, and love filled every corner of the cabin that Nathan had built with his own hands so many years ago. Children ran through the rooms where Nathan and Beatrice's babies had taken their first steps. Grandchildren played with the wooden toys Nathan had carved, just as their parents had before them. As the evening wound down and families prepared to leave or settle in for the night, Nina approached her parents. At 32, she was beautiful and confident, her school thriving and her life full of purpose. "Thank you," she said, hugging them both, "for showing us what real love looks like, for building something so strong that it holds all of us up." "That's what family does," Beatrice said, her eyes misty with happy tears. "We hold each other up." "And it all started because Dad rescued a cat," Noah added with a grin. "He was holding his youngest daughter, a tiny thing barely a year old. I tell my kids that story all the time. How Grandpa was so gentle with a little kitten that Grandma fell in love with him right then." "It's true," Beatrice confirmed. "I saw his tender side, his gentle heart, and I was lost." Nathan ducked his head, embarrassed by the attention even after all these years. "It was just a kitten." "It was never just a kitten," Beatrice corrected gently. "It was the moment that changed both our lives forever." As their family settled down for the night, some in the addition Nathan had built, others in tents outside, Nathan and Beatrice retreated to their bedroom. It was the same room where all four of their children had been born, where they had spent countless nights talking and dreaming and simply being together. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, as he had so many times over the years. "So happy," Beatrice replied, also as she had so many times. But tonight she added, "I look at our family, at this life we've built, and I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. We've been so blessed, Nathan." "We have," he agreed. "And it's not over yet. We've still got years ahead of us, God willing, more grandchildren to spoil, more memories to make. More adventures to have," Beatrice added. "Maybe we should get another kitten, for old time's sake." Nathan laughed. "I think Rusty would be rolling in his grave. He never did like competition." They had buried the old orange cat 5 years earlier after he lived to the ripe old age of 20. He had been a faithful companion, a good mouser, and a constant reminder of the day Nathan and Beatrice's story began. As they lay in bed that night, Beatrice thought about the circle of life, how beginnings and endings flowed into each other, how love created ripples that spread far beyond the original source. She and Nathan had loved each other, and from that love had come children, and from them grandchildren, and who knew how far their legacy would extend. "I'm thinking about that day a lot lately," Nathan said quietly. "The day I saw you trying to rescue that kitten." "Why?" "Because I think about how easily we might have missed each other. If I hadn't come back to town that day, if you hadn't been hanging laundry at that exact moment, if that kitten hadn't gotten stuck." He pulled her closer. "So many things had to align perfectly for us to find each other." "Maybe it was fate," Beatrice suggested. "Maybe we were always meant to find each other one way or another." "Maybe," Nathan agreed. "All I know is I'm grateful every day that I did. You gave me everything, Beatrice. A home, a family, a purpose. You made me whole." "You did the same for me," Beatrice whispered. "I was so lost when I came here, so alone. And then you appeared, this strong, gentle man who saw me as something precious, who loved me enough to share your life with me." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had for 30 years. Outside, the mountains stood eternal and unchanging, keeping watch over the cabin and the family it sheltered. The wind whispered through the pines, a lullaby as old as time. The years that followed were good ones. Nathan and Beatrice aged gracefully, their love a constant in a changing world. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated marriages and births, mourned losses and celebrated triumphs. Through it all, they remained each other's anchor, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. When Nathan was 72 and Beatrice 70, they made a journey down to Silver Peak for the dedication of Nina's new school building. The original had grown too small for the number of students, and the town had rallied to build something bigger and better. Nina had named it the Walker School in honor of her parents and the values they had instilled in her. "We don't deserve this," Nathan protested when he heard. "You deserve this and more," Nina replied firmly. "You showed me that education matters, that kindness matters, that building something good and lasting is the most important work there is. This school is my way of passing that on." At the dedication ceremony, the whole family was present, Noah and his 5 children, Nina with her husband and their 3 children, the twins, both married now with families of their own. The cabin in the mountains was often empty these days, with Nathan and Beatrice's children and grandchildren scattered across the territory, building their own lives and legacies. But they all came together for important occasions, drawn by the bond that Nathan and Beatrice had forged. They came because family mattered, because love mattered, because the example their parents had set deserved to be honored and continued. As Beatrice sat in the audience watching Nina speak, Nathan's hand warm in hers, she felt a profound sense of peace. This was what they had built. Not just children and grandchildren, but a legacy of love and strength and integrity that would outlast them both. After the ceremony, Mrs. Caldwell approached them. She was ancient now, well into her 90s, but her eyes were still sharp and her mind clear. "I remember when you first came to town," she said to Beatrice. "You were so young and lost, trying so hard to be brave." "You were kind to me," Beatrice replied. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing, and look what you made of it." Mrs. Caldwell gestured to the crowd of walkers surrounding them. "You built something beautiful, Beatrice. You and Nathan both." "We had a lot of help," Nathan said. "Starting with you, Mrs. Caldwell." The old woman smiled. "All I did was give you a place to meet. The rest was all you two." She patted Beatrice's hand. "I'm glad you found each other. I'm glad that Kitten got stuck on my roof." "Me too," Beatrice said softly. "Me too." That evening, as they prepared for the long journey back to the mountains, their children gathered to say goodbye. There were hugs and promises to visit soon, grandchildren clinging to Nathan's legs and begging for one more story. "Come see us before the snow flies," Beatrice urged. "You know how hard it is to get to the cabin in winter." They promised they would, and Beatrice believed them. Her children understood the importance of family, of staying connected even when distance separated them. They had learned that from watching Nathan and Beatrice's devotion to each other over the years. The ride back to the mountains was slow and peaceful. Nathan and Beatrice had made this journey countless times over the decades, and the trail was as familiar as their own faces. They rode in comfortable silence, no need for words after so many years together. When the cabin came into view, Beatrice felt the same sense of homecoming she always did. This place, this little valley in the mountains, had been her home for more than 30 years. She knew every tree, every rock, every bend in the stream. She knew how the light fell at different times of day, how the seasons changed the landscape, how the animals moved through the territory. But more than the physical place, it was home because Nathan was there. Wherever he was, that was where she wanted to be. They spent the evening quietly, Nathan reading aloud while Beatrice mended clothes. It was a scene they had repeated thousands of times, comfortable and domestic and precious for its very ordinariness. This was what love looked like after 30 years. Not constant excitement or grand gestures, but quiet companionship, the pleasure of simply being together. "You remember our first night here?" Nathan asked suddenly. "Of course. I was so nervous." "So was I. I was terrified you would hate it, that you would regret marrying me." Beatrice set down her mending and moved to sit beside him. "I never regretted it, not for 1 second. This life, this place, it's been everything I ever wanted, even when I didn't know that's what I wanted." Nathan pulled her close. "I love you, Beatrice. After all these years, after everything we've been through, I love you more than ever." "I love you too." Beatrice rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for rescuing that kitten," Nathan chuckled. "Thank you for giving me a reason to." They sat together as the fire burned low. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a life that defied expectations. From the moment Nathan had shown his tender side while holding a tiny kitten, Beatrice had known he was special. She had seen past the rough exterior to the gentle heart beneath, and she had loved him for it. That love had grown and deepened over the years, weathering storms and celebrating joys, always constant, always true. It had been the foundation for a family, the bedrock of a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. As Beatrice dozed off in Nathan's arms, she thought about all the moments that had led them here. The grief that had driven her west, the loneliness that had nearly consumed her. The kitten crying on a roof, the mountain man who had climbed up to rescue it with such unexpected tenderness. Every moment had been necessary. Every step had led her exactly where she needed to be. To this man, this life, this love that had transformed everything. And to think it all started with a simple act of kindness, a gentle touch, a tender heart revealed at exactly the right moment. Sometimes, Beatrice thought, the smallest actions have the biggest consequences. A kitten gets stuck. A man rescues it. A woman sees his gentle soul and falls in love. And from that one moment, a whole life unfolds, full of love and joy and meaning beyond measure. It was a good story, she thought. No, it was a great story. Their story. And she wouldn't change a single word of it. As the years continued to roll by, Nathan and Beatrice settled into the peaceful rhythm of their later years. They spent their days tending their garden, maintaining the cabin, and welcoming the steady stream of children and grandchildren who came to visit. Each visit brought new stories, new joys, new reasons to be grateful for the life they had built together. When Nathan was 75, he began teaching his oldest grandson, Noah's eldest boy, the art of tracking and survival in the mountains. The boy, also named Nathan in honor of his grandfather, was eager to learn. He spent his summers at the cabin, soaking up every bit of wisdom his grandfather could impart. "He reminds me of you," Beatrice told Nathan one evening as they watched young Nathan practicing with his bow. "So serious, so focused on doing things right." "He's a good boy," Nathan agreed. "They all are. We have good grandchildren, Beatrice, because they have good parents, and their parents had good parents." Beatrice smiled. "See how that works? Are you saying we did something right?" "I'm saying we did everything right. Look at our family, Nathan. 4 successful children, all happy and settled in good marriages. 17 grandchildren, all healthy and thriving. All because we loved each other and showed them what real love looks like." Nathan pulled her close. "It's more than I ever dreamed possible. When I was living up here alone all those years ago, I never imagined any of this. And I never imagined finding love in the wilderness. I thought I was just surviving, just trying to make it through each day. Then you rescued a kitten and everything changed." "Best kitten that ever lived," Nathan said with a smile. As another winter approached, Nathan and Beatrice made a decision. They were getting older, and the harsh mountain winters were becoming more difficult to manage. After much discussion with their children, they decided to build a small house in Silver Peak for the winter months, returning to the mountain cabin in the summers. It was bittersweet, leaving the cabin where they had spent so many years. But they both knew it was the practical choice. And besides, as Nathan pointed out, they would still have their summers in the mountains. The cabin would always be there, a testament to the life they had built. The house in Silver Peak was modest but comfortable, close to Nina's school and near Mrs. Caldwell's old boarding house, which was now run by one of Mrs. Caldwell's granddaughters. It felt right somehow, coming full circle to where their story had begun. That first winter in town, Beatrice and Nathan became fixtures in the community. Nathan helped with various building projects, his strength and skill still impressive even in his mid-70s. Beatrice volunteered at Nina's school, teaching the children to bake and sew. They attended church socials and town meetings, finally becoming part of the community they had kept at arm's length for so many years. "This is nice," Beatrice admitted one evening. "I thought I would miss the cabin terribly, and I do. But there's something wonderful about being part of a community again." "As long as we can go back to the mountains come summer," Nathan said. "Always. That's our home, Nathan. This is just a winter residence." When spring arrived, they made the journey back to the cabin with great joy. The building had weathered the winter well, and soon they had it cleaned and aired out, ready for another season. Their children and grandchildren visited throughout the summer, and the cabin rang with laughter and life. This became their pattern for the next several years. Winters in Silver Peak, summers in the mountains. It gave them the best of both worlds, the community and convenience of town, and the peace and beauty of their mountain home. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their entire family gathered at the mountain cabin for a celebration. 40 years of marriage, 4 children, 17 grandchildren, and counting. It was a legacy beyond anything either of them had imagined. During the celebration, Noah stood up to make a speech. "I want to thank my parents," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "for showing us what real love looks like, what commitment means, what it takes to build something that lasts." He gestured around at the assembled family. "All of this, every person in this room exists because 40 years ago, a man rescued a kitten from a roof. Because a woman saw past the rough exterior to the gentle heart beneath. Because 2 people chose to love each other every single day, through good times and bad, through challenges and triumphs." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Nathan and Beatrice stood together, their hands clasped, tears streaming down their weathered faces. "We didn't do anything special," Nathan tried to say, but Nina cut him off. "You did everything special," she said firmly. "You loved each other. You built a home. You raised us with kindness and strength. You showed us that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. That's the greatest gift you could have given us." The celebration continued late into the night, full of music and dancing and joy. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Beatrice and Nathan stood on the porch watching their family. 40 years, Nathan mused. "Feels like both a lifetime and just a moment." "It's been the best years of my life," Beatrice said. "Every single day with you has been a gift. Even the hard days, especially the hard days, because we faced them together, because we were strong enough to weather any storm as long as we had each other." Nathan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Here's to 40 more." "I'll take as many as we get," Beatrice replied. "However long we have, I want to spend it with you." As they stood there, surrounded by the evidence of their love, their children, grandchildren, the life they had built, Beatrice thought about the journey that had brought them here. Every challenge, every joy, every ordinary moment had been part of the tapestry of their life together. And it all traced back to one extraordinary day when a mountain man had shown his tender side, and a lonely woman had seen exactly who he was beneath the rough exterior. When kindness and gentleness had bridged the gap between 2 souls, creating a connection that would last a lifetime. Nathan and Beatrice lived several more beautiful years together, each one precious and full of love. They watched more grandchildren be born, attended weddings and celebrations, and continued to be the heart and center of their large, loving family. When Nathan passed away at the age of 82, peaceful in his sleep after a full and well-lived life, Beatrice mourned deeply but found comfort in the legacy they had created together. Their children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, supporting her through the grief. She spent her remaining years dividing her time between the mountain cabin in the summer, never alone, always with family visiting, and the house in Silver Peak in the winter. She told stories about Nathan to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and passing on the lessons he had taught. On a warm summer evening, just shy of her 85th birthday, Beatrice passed away in the cabin, surrounded by her children. Her last words were about Nathan, about the day he had rescued the kitten, about how she had fallen in love with him right then and never stopped. They buried her next to Nathan in a small cemetery near Silver Peak, with a view of the mountains they had both loved so much. The headstone read, "Nathan and Beatrice Walker, 2 hearts, 1 love, forever together." Their children and grandchildren continued the traditions they had established. The mountain cabin remained in the family, passed down through the generations. Nina's school continued to thrive, teaching new generations the values of hard work, kindness, and integrity. Noah's children became skilled mountain guides, sharing their grandfather's love of the wilderness with others. And the story of how Nathan and Beatrice met, how a mountain man rescued a kitten and showed his tender side, and how a woman saw his gentle heart and fell in love, became family legend. It was told at gatherings and celebrations, passed down to each new generation as an example of how love can bloom in the most unexpected places, how small acts of kindness can change everything, how seeing someone's true heart is the beginning of something extraordinary. Their great-grandchildren would visit the old cabin and imagine their great-grandparents there, young and in love, building a life together in the wilderness. They would walk the trails Nathan had walked, tend the garden Beatrice had planted, and feel the presence of a love so strong it seemed to linger in the very air. The story of Nathan and Beatrice Walker became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of love, the importance of seeing beyond surfaces to the truth beneath, and the way one moment of genuine connection can ripple out through generations, creating waves of love and legacy that never truly end. And somewhere in the mountains, if you listen carefully, you might still hear echoes of their laughter, still feel the warmth of their love, still sense the gentle strength that defined their lives together. Because true love never really dies. It lives on in the hearts and lives of those who come after, an eternal flame passed from generation to generation, lighting the way for all who follow. All because a kitten got stuck on a roof, and a mountain man with a tender heart climbed up to save it, and a woman had the wisdom to see past the rough exterior to the beautiful soul within. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest moments. Sometimes forever starts with a single act of kindness. And sometimes, just sometimes, falling in love happens in an instant and lasts for all eternity.